So, due to low recruiting numbers, the Army has come up with a plan. If you want to know what that plan is, stick around and find out.
Rogersarnt!
All right, so welcome back to rogersarnt, where we talk all things Army. And today we're going to be discussing the Army's plan on augmenting recruitment initiatives. I read in the Army Times, and it's titled, Army Starts No Penalty Purge of Ineffective Recruiters. So what does that mean? What that just means is that due to the Army missing its goals, it's coming up with a new plan. And that plan is to relieve these ineffective recruiters and send them back to the formation and get new recruiters to get some recruits in. There's a lot to say today, so I'm going to be going back and forth between articles and my notes so you guys can get the full spiel of what's going on, because this is crazy. The article, like I said, says Army starts no purge penalty of ineffective recruiters. So the Army decided, since it missed its goal for last year, that it's going to try and make that up by adding another 5,000. So Mill.com says the Army does not expect to hit its ambitious recruiting goal of 65,000 new soldiers this year, as the pool of young Americans eligible to serve continues to shrink. This goes up from last year. From 2022, it was 40,000 in which they tried to hit. So that didn't work. So they're just going to say, you know what? Let's up the ante. So I'm going to go into Fortune.com. Fortune.com says, and this is the Army Secretary Christine Wormuth, said the Army has set a difficult goal for this year, aiming to bring 65,000 recruits, which would be 20,000 more than 2022. It's difficult to predict how it will go, she adds. The recruiters need to do all they can do to surpass last year's numbers. What's baffling to me is that this is not just an Army issue. This is the National Guard, the Coast Guard. So it's not just us. The only entity that's not having an issue is the Space Force. And I don't know what the heck they do. I've been in for 15 years. They just started. I have no clue what they do. However, the reason why they don't have the issues because, one, they're the smallest branch, and two, they depend on Air Force recruits to transfer, right? That's what they kind of do. They missed their recruiting goal by 15,000, and they bump up 5 extra thousand and expect to recuperate that. Now, the article does say that if they continue to do as well as they've been doing this year, that they can get 73,000. In all fairness, they did bump it up. However, they're on track. Let's put it that way. The thing about this is that it's kind of tough to identify like what the problem is. Is it the recruiters or is it the pool of individuals, right? And we'll talk about that a little later. The article that reads, the Army starts no penalty purge of ineffective recruiters, and this was on May 11th. It says, as the Army struggles to meet its recruiting target goals, which they'll miss it again this year, a memo from Army Recruit Command Major General Johnny Davis implemented recent changes to the Army regulation governing how recruiters are assigned and, if necessary, removed from command. In the Army, we are taught to identify a problem. And when we identify a problem, we have to provide a solution. So this is Major General Davis identifying the problem and then providing the solution. Now, the issue that I think many soldiers or many NCOs are going to have, they are going to be transferred, taken out, moved back to their units, which they're labeled ineffective. So that's the issue. So they come up with a solution, but at what cost? And at the cost of whose career? So, and then we'll move into the next one, which is one of the biggest changes is that the command will remove ineffective recruiters without giving them a negative evaluation, including both 79 Romeo recruiters and those involuntarily selected by the Army for temporary duties. Under the previous regulation, recruiting commands had the discretion to slap failed Army selected recruiters with relief for cause evaluations that could torpedo the recipient's career, regardless of their competence in their primary specialty. While they are not doing a relief for cause, which that in itself is going to prompt a QMP, which is a quality management program. It automatically kind of like prompts the HRC to look at this individual and potentially take them out the Army, right? So while they're not doing that, they're still still holding them accountable and giving them a shorter NCOER. So let's say, for instance, I arrive to my recruiting duty, and then I'm there for a year. I'm not doing too good, and then I go through the process, which we'll talk about in a second, and then all of a sudden I'm in that program with the retrain, and then I get sent back. So I have a year, so that's one NCOER, and then I'll have maybe a 6-month NCOER, and then it'll show a transfer. So smart minds already know that if I'm cut short of my tour, which is 2 or 3 years, then they're gonna know that I was ineffective. It speaks to the board without having to say it. The thing is that they're holding them responsible, not accountable, because they're responsible. It's not really their fault because they didn't come up with the program, right? They're not the leaders. So the accountability, where is that falling at? Is recruiting command taking accountability for it and getting those leaders out of the position and bringing in new blood to potentially come up with new initiatives? Because in reality, let's look at it. The recruiting initiatives and incentives are way back, like Stone Age. They're relics. It's you can get money and tuition, right? Those are the biggest selling points, and of course serving your nation, but that doesn't do it for everyone. Next is the memo itself, right? So the memo itself defines ineffective recruiters as those who have been assigned to the command for at least 1 year, going back to 1 May of 2022, and those who have 2 or fewer recruits signed since October 1st. Essentially what they're doing is that they're kind of trying to remove everyone from a year back, and then they're going to start with like the actual initiative with the 90 days, and then it goes on. So the thing about this is it's very pinpoint. They're trying to blame the recruiters. While a lot of recruiters that are there, they may not want to be there because a lot of them are DA selected, Department of the Army selected, and they don't want to be there. It's not their fault. Also, those who want to be there, it's also not their fault. The system is old, and we need to change it. And we don't change it by removing those who are there and expect it to just change miraculously. So the second part of this is Davis noted that each recruiter assigned to a production role, which comes with extra pay, is responsible for at least 1 per month. So when they say the recruiter in a production role, that just means that their primary purpose is to recruit new soldiers. Pretty much almost any recruiter falls under that. The next bullet that I'm going to read is going to be recruiting leaders must counsel and offer remedial training to substandard recruiters before tagging them as ineffective and involuntary reassignments. What does the remedial training consist of? Is it the same old washed up rinse and repeat training that they got prior to becoming recruiters? Or is it some new training that they haven't seen yet? Has an entity come in that's outside the Army and done studies and provided facts and new alternatives to recruiting or ways to like be a public speaker? Let's really think about it. In order to convince, because as a recruiter, you're trying to convince someone, and you're just not trying to convince that 18-year-old or potentially 17-year-old in a waiver and above. You're trying to convince them and potentially their parents. So are we providing those type of talking points? Are we providing any of those characteristics or any of those assessments on what needs to be done or what can be done better in order to get these individuals to say yes, sign that dotted line, and actually show up to MEPS and swear in and get on the bus and go to basic training? Are we doing that? Because if not, it's the same old, same old. You're just running them through the same old process and hoping that it works, that all of a sudden it clicks. But it's not. It's not going to click because you're using the same method. So if you use the same method, what do you expect? Einstein said doing the same thing over and over again is insanity. That holds to be true if this is what they're doing. If they're continuing the same process, then they're just spinning their wheels. Next thing is going to be the recruiters who haven't produced. So this is the exception. It says recruiters who haven't produced contracts through no fault of their own won't face reassignment, the memo said. So the reasons that could include are non-recruiting temporary duty assignments, medical leave, parental leave, hold holding a role that quarters voluminous administrative tasks, such as working for a large command recruiting station. So this 100% I agree. If you're not actually tasked in a production role, then obviously you're not going to be held accountable. This is the exception. It still puts a fire on them, because when they go back to their role of recruiting, now they know, hey, I gotta spark it. And another thing about recruiting, I've spoken to multiple recruiters. I have a bunch of buddies that are recruiters, and recruiting is not all it's cracked up to be. And don't get me wrong, the duty station is what you make it. However, you do have like these initiatives that are kind of like, it's kind of hard to meet. They have these expectations, and you're only as good as your last month. So if you put in 5 recruits in January, and then February you put in 0, you're looked at as you're not doing your job. Does that make sense? So in reality, how are we keeping these recruiters motivated? A lot of times what they'll do is, well, if we don't get no one this week, then we're working Saturday. So now we're taking time away. We're working extra hours. Like, these recruiters, if you go on any sergeant's recruiting page, like their Facebook recruiting page, you can see that they're out here in these streets. They're on Saturdays and Friday, weekdays. They're visiting schools. They're cold calling. They're following up. And what more do you want them to do? The nation isn't what it used to be. We are revered, but not found relevant. And that's a controversial take, because when you think of the Army, you think of bang, 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 breaking down doors and protecting the nation. But right now we're not in that time. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to be in a time of war all day long. But a lot of individuals who are not in the Army may see that and be like, you know what, I'll answer the nation's call when it's time. And in the meantime, they also have thoughts of living a life out of the Army. There's so many things that are going on outside the Army that individuals, like, it's hard to say, to raise your right hand and swear in. I'm telling you, with the rise of social media, entrepreneurship, there are a lot of things out there that are deterring these young recruits from coming in, and we got to figure out, how can we match that? Is it BAH rates that need to go up? BAS rates that need to go up? Does the pay need to go up? We need to figure it out. And sending these recruiters back to the same old training, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is not the answer. All right, so next thing that they said, what Major General Davis said, that one of the effort is to have a special assignment battery that can help officials assess whether a non-commissioned officer is better fit for recruiting duty or drill sergeant duty. These are the 2 main voluntary assignments, right? Involuntary assignments that many of staff sergeants are going to be selected for. So in reality, that might be one of many courses of action that need to come out that are going to be really good. So think about this. Not everyone wants to be a recruiter. Not everyone has the gift of gab, if you will, throwing up air quotes. And not everyone wants to be a drill sergeant. Not everyone likes to work long hours and or be that disciplinarian, right? Some people are more introvert. So if we can look at their profiles and what their suggestions are, because in the bottom of an NCOER, it says what are the next generating assignments, right? Or special assignments that they would fit. And typically that NCO sits down with their rater and senior rater, and they come up with those. And they say, I want to be a drill sergeant. Like, I have a staff sergeant. He's now my old platoon sergeant. He wanted to be a drill sergeant. We wrote that down on his NCOER, and guess what? He is going to be a drill sergeant. So he is going to an assignment in which he wants to be. So therefore, I think he would be more productive. The next thing they talk about is the new regulation also eases up on assignment eligibility qualifications, reducing the required general technical, which is the GT score, down from 95 to 90, and also relieving soldiers who have GED rather than a high school diploma, making them eligible. And 100%, like, this is not lowering your standards to join the Army, right? Because despite that, like, they're also speaking of, if they haven't already, they're lowering the ASVAB test from 31 to like 16. They're allowing troops to come in overweight and get in the program post-Army, so they can shave that weight off. This is not that. This is an individual who has been in for at least 8 years. Well, it depends. If you're a fast tracker, it could be 6 years. But the average, let's say 8 years, and they've proven themselves in the Army. They're already in the Army. Obviously, they're retainable. If they want to volunteer volunteer, then they have it open. Before, you had to be a 95 GT score. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure why we still have at the rank of Staff Sergeant, we still have a 95 GT score, because when you arrive to your unit, your first duty station, that should be, and I've spoken about this in previous podcasts, this should be your primary goal. One of your primary goals for your troops is to get them above a 110, because 110 opens doors for any application and or schools, special schools that soldiers may want to apply for, like Ranger School, 110. You want to go be an officer, 110. You want to be a warrant officer, you need a 110. But I digress. The fact that they're going to lower that down, and hey, if you got a GD, a high school diploma, you still passed the curriculum and you were able to come in the Army, so it should be good enough to recruit individuals. And a lot of those individuals that have been held back are going to be very happy at this point, because I know a lot of individuals that want to do recruiting and like recruiting after they've been on it. Another thing that could be one of the detriments to the Army recruiting is the rise in social media, not as an entrepreneur, but a lot of individuals complaining about the Army. You know, word of mouth is very powerful, and when we take that influence and we put it out there, and it's painting the Army in a negative light, it does us no good either. Leaders have to get better at relating with their troops, and this is all across the board. We have to get better. And I'm not saying coddle them, but we need to find a way, a happy medium, to get the mission accomplished while keeping them happy. Because the happy soldier will go to the ends of depth of the world for you. And that'll probably avoid all these negative TikToks, Instagram posts and Facebook posts and stuff like that. General Gary Brito also told the Army Times that in March that the Army Recruiting School is undergoing an overhaul and has changed its curriculum to include an expanded real-world exercise and lessons about the practical implications of living further away from the military installation. New recruiters may be better aligned with places they and their families are more comfortable living and working in, right? So what their last statement was, we want recruiters to be allowed to be part of the process of where they go. So pretty much they want them to be able to talk to their families, say, hey, I'm on recruiting orders, where are we going at the end of the day? I don't think that's a bad idea, because if I'm going to get tasked to be a recruiter, if I'm going to get on orders to be a recruiter, and you tell me, hey, where do you want to go? And I tell you, hey, I want to go back to Puerto Rico or something like that. I want to recruit over there. I'll probably be more happy, right? My family will probably be more happy because we're around people that we know. While this is a good initiative, you still have to get the culture of recruiting commands under control. There's a consistent pressure to make numbers, always. Just like you see there's a pressure to make numbers for the entire Army and how they're dealing with it by relieving ineffective recruiters. You have these station commanders that are also under pressure. And what do? What happens? They just crack the whip. And who suffers? The recruiters. And how effective is the delivery of that said recruiter going to be to that potential recruit if it's coming across as desperate and just disingenuous, right? It's just not coming off natural. Things that we got to think about. These bonuses are no longer attractive. The tuition assistance is no longer attractive. I think freaking Starbucks helps with tuition, you know? There are many companies and corporations that are giving tuition assistance and that are paying well, and it's an uphill battle, but we'll figure it out. In conclusion, I have a couple things that I have here that I'm thinking of that are deterring the Army. There are many factors. However, the Army always figures it out. But let's think about this. You have obesity, right? Because you have a pool. Yeah, you have America, and then you have to narrow that pool down, right? And obesity is one of them. Like America, last time I checked, I think they were like 10th, number 1 or 10th in the world. I can't remember, but we're in the top 10 for sure. You have drug charges or individuals that are just use drugs, criminal record. You have the rise in content creation, like I said. Another one that I read is that this new generation is just not as patriotic as the old school generation was, right? Before, like 20, 30 years ago, you talk to a potential recruit, you ask them why they serve, and they say to defend my country. It was an honor, it was a badge of honor to defend your country, which it still is. Another reason that I was told is parents refuse to let their children serve under this administration. Now we're talking about political views. Depending on who's in office, that parent may discourage them to serve. That child may have to wait till they're out the house to make their own decision. Another thing is ADHD medication. 1 year, when individuals on that, the new or one of the policies is must be off of it for 2 years. If it's changed as of today, let me know. Put that down in the comments. In Fortune, one of the ads says, young people don't want to die or get injured. They don't want to deal with the stress of Army life or put their lives on hold. So what is that? FOMO, fear of missing out. The military as a whole, they're facing an uphill battle. And I'm certain it's going to take maybe a couple years, but I'm certain that we will figure it out. We'll keep probably performing below the recruiting numbers, but we'll come up with a way to incentivize these potential troops and get them on in here. Because I'm not gonna lie, I've been doing this for 15 years and I have bad days and I have good days. The Army's given me a lot. I've gotten college out of them. I've gotten to defend my country to my fullest potential. Nice house, nice family, nice vehicles, very well off financially. So I think if we get more of these stories out, we can change the culture and we can change the narrative. And that's my point. Don't listen to all these social media posters that the Army's all bad, because it's not. Most of these individuals that are posting and saying that the Army's all bad, they're re-enlisting. A lot of them are re-enlisting. Some of them aren't, but a lot of them are. All right, so that's it for today. I thank you guys for joining the rogersarnt podcast. You can find me on Facebook, TikTok, IG. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or any suggestions on what you want me to cover or any ideas, you can email me at rogersarnt@gmail.com. And remember, you don't have to embrace the suck if you got the right tools in your ruck.
Rogersarnt!